Thank you for everybody coming out on a blustery night in Canada. So I want to start off by reading some statutory kind of information for our council meetings. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. To avoid disruptions during our meeting, we'd appreciate if members of the audience would please turn off or mute your cell phones, Blackberries, other personal digital devices. Thank you. Orangeville Town Council welcomes and encourages members of the public to comment on matters of interest to them. However, delegates are cautioned that derogatory or inappropriate remarks may constitute slander and could potentially lead to legal action against them. If such comments are made, the delegate will not be permitted to continue speaking, and the comments will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Our procedural bylaw allows for delegations to have a 5-minute presentation during our question and answer period. Those who wish to speak have a 3-minute window to talk. Those times can be extended by council agreement. So I'd like to start off with approval of tonight's agenda. If I could have a motion. Councillor Peters, second. Councillor Andrews, all in favor? Thank you. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest by council members? None being seen. We'll move on to item 5, adoption of minutes of the previous council meeting. That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on January 14th, the minutes of council operating budget meeting held on January 21st, and the council capital budget meeting held on January 22nd, 2019 be approved. May I have a motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconder. Councillor Sherwood, all in favor? Passed unanimously, thank you. We have a couple of presentations tonight. We're going to do presentations to our 2018 Municipal Seniors of the Year. And I'm going to read off this information about our two seniors this year. The Municipal Senior of the Year Award began in 1996. The program honors an outstanding Orangeville senior who is 55 years of age or older and who has enriched the social, cultural, or civic life of the community without thoughts of personal or financial gain in one or more of the following categories: volunteerism, education, humanitarian activities, arts and literature, preservation of history, environment, science, community service, and fitness, recreation, or sports. The public submits nominations to the Honors Committee with final decision made by Council. The recipient receives an individual plaque and a nameplate on the plaque in Council chambers. And I'll just show this. As many of you know, the Council chambers have recently been renovated, and we thank staff for getting this done. It's a fantastic improvement. So this will be hung here in council chambers. We're not quite sure which wall, but and our two winners for 2018 here are already on our plaque, so that will be put in place shortly. So I'm going to start with Jill Cutter. If you could come to the podium, please. I need to speak in my. Oh, okay. So let me tell you about Jill and her community activities. An active member of our community since 1980, Jill has many titles: wife, mother, grandmother, friend, and the Energizer Bunny, the person who gets things done. Since joining the Orangeville and District Horticultural Society in 2001, Jill has made many contributions to the group. She's a board member, coordinator of the Garden Angels, the Horticultural Society crew that takes care of 10 gardens, and organizes workshops for the members. The annual Hidden Gems Garden Tour fundraiser for the Horticultural Society is another project that is successful because of Jill's participation and leadership. As a past member of Go-Go Grannies, she could always be counted on to help with their fundraisers, make jars of bean soup, and organize garden teas. As a member of the Communities in Bloom Committee, Jill was responsible for the Christmas Lights Contest, the Garden Contest, and an active participant in the pumpkin carving event and the annual Judges Tour. Always the willing volunteer. No job is too big or too small for Jill to take on. Congratulations, Jill, and thank you. Okay, I've just been given a note that when I'm standing, the cameras aren't picking me up at all. So I'm going to sit and read this one. So, okay, and the next winner of Seniors of the Year award is Ruth Garwood. Dedicating herself to helping the community, Ruth has lived in Orangeville for over 18 years. During those 18 years, she has volunteered countless hours with many organizations. Here are just a few. Ruth has been the commissioner for Girl Guides in Orangeville, as well as a Spark, Brownie, and Guide leader. When the Orangeville Minor Soccer League was short on coaches, Ruth stepped up and became a coach so more children could play soccer. Helping youth has always been important to Ruth. A member of the Royal Canadian Legion, Ruth never says no when a volunteer is needed. She is a member of the Color Party, offers IT support, and is Royal Canadian Legion liaison with the 85th Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron in Grand Valley and the 1849 Lawrence Scots Royal Canadian Army Cadets in Orangeville. Ruth is also the commanding officer of the 164 Squadron Royal Canadian Air Cadets in Shelburne. Ruth, thank you for your contributions to our community and congratulations. Okay, moving on to 6.2, Orangeville Highlands Local Planning Appeal Tribunal hearing. We're going to have an information report, I believe from either Gord or Brandon tonight. Brandon? Okay, Brandon Ward is Senior Planner for the Town of Orangeville. Brandon.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's been a considerable amount of interest in the applications related to the Orangeville Highlands development proposal. There's a couple points I would like to just highlight with respect to this matter, particularly as it relates to the applications being subject to an appeal before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. First of which is that there's an upcoming pre-hearing set for February 26th, and perhaps much of the concern relates to the potential for a decision to be made on the applications at that pre-hearing. I want to emphasize that a decision will not be made at that pre-hearing event because initially when this pre-hearing conference was scheduled back in July, related to this matter, it was scheduled on the basis that this February pre-hearing matter would be set really as an opportunity to check in with respect to the status of the processing of these applications. It would serve as an opportunity to refine an issues list and potentially a procedural order with respect to a possible upcoming hearing event to be scheduled, presumably at this pre-hearing event. So again, I just want to stress that a decision will not be made with respect to the applications at the matter. And further to that, in light of the fact that the applications are under an ongoing review process, of which involved a public meeting held in September of last year, I want to emphasize that it would be premature for council to really come forward with a position or an opinion on the applications at this time, given that they are still subject to an ongoing review process. Reason being is because under the Planning Act, council, in making any decision that relates to a planning matter, that decision must be consistent with provincial policy and conform to provincial plans and municipal planning documents. And the answer to those tests is really determined through the completion of the planning review process. And because that is still underway, it really is premature to answer those tests and hence come to a planning or opinion on the matter at hand. And one final point I wanted to raise is that in light of the interest being expressed on this, there may be an interest of some to I guess, invest themselves or participate in the hearing event. I would suggest that for those wishing to do so, they should probably contact the local appeal support center, which is an agency of the provincial government, and that will give further direction and perhaps guidance on for any individuals looking to involve themselves in the hearing matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, so our first delegation, 622, Mr. Darren Davidson.
Preferred that this is used here? Yes. Is it on? Thank you. I can hear me. You can hear me. Thank you. I'm Darren Davidson, a resident of Orangeville. I'm currently the new chair of the Hanson High Density Awareness Group. I want to thank you all, the clerk's office, councillors, and staff, for the opportunity to address this meeting about the critical issues that will have profound effects and impacts upon the future of our social, economic, and environmental interests, and in particular referring to the Hanson lands that abut the Orangeville Mall. I want to thank council, each member personally. This past week, members of our group, the Hanson High Density Awareness Group, reached out to the councillors, and they took our phone calls and interests and spent quite a bit of time discussing the issues with us. So thank you very much for your efforts. I want to acknowledge the following before I move along. Dorothy Peterson, she was our past chair. I'd like to acknowledge her on the public record for her efforts and bringing the group to this position that we're in now. Is without her tireless effort that we would not be here. I'd like to also thank the other representatives and the members of our group that come from all over, not just Orangeville, but from Dufferin County. That includes Amaranth and Mono in particular. I'd like to acknowledge that tonight the representatives from Amaranth were supposed to be here from their particular official status, but I'd like to recognize Fred Nix from Mono Council being here tonight. Thank you, sir, for showing up and showing your support. Let's acknowledge that we are a group of concerned citizens, and we've had over 100 people attend our meetings since earlier this 2018. We want to make a couple things clear before we move forward. We recognize the entitlements and rights of the investors.
Excuse me, Darren, could you just back up about 3 inches there?
Thank you.
Perfect.
How's that? We recognize the entitlements and rights of the investors who have title and to the Hanson lands. We recognize the role and the duty of town councillors to uphold the interests of the corporation of the town of Orangeville and the interests of its constituents. But we also believe there are unrecognized alternatives and options to ensuring a win-win-win for all stakeholders involved in this plot of land. That being the investors/developers, the town councillors itself, and the citizens of Orangeville. So why are we here? We're here to address the concerns that pertain to the impending development of the Hanson lands. Specifically, we're here to address the application by the developer and investors that seeks to increase the density of the Hanson development project. On February 28th, notwithstanding what was mentioned by Mr. Ward, our member group has obtained party status to attend the LPAT tribunal hearing. That is to address the appeal of the developer to increase the density from 500 and so units up to 600 units. We're here tonight because we are seeking council support, and we're asking council to join us in taking a leadership role. So what are the issues? We believe there remains some unresolved concerns that will have significant negative yet avoidable impacts upon the lands and the waterways within our jurisdiction. Certainly, the environmental concerns include our natural heritage, stormwater management and runoff, source water protection, water table recharge, and species endangerment. And of course, what is included with that is also the traffic. An example of some concerns is recently CVC has downgraded the Orangeville Wetland Complex, which is part of the Hanson lands, from a grade of B to C. And we are under the knowledge that this will only deteriorate over time with further development. We're concerned that the project is moving forward without an outdated town official plan, and also with some reports that are not up to date. In addition to that, there's some consideration for some other additional factors that need to be addressed. We question how plans for increased density can move forward without the unofficial updated plan from the official plan. We're concerned around issues that haven't been addressed, such as climate change, Bill 66, and recently the big box development that we've all heard about for the Orangeville Mall. We understand there's not really a comprehensive growth plan. To go forward in this, we believe it is piecemeal development. And if all of us who understand the last 15 years and have concern for the development of Orangeville, we understand that we seek to have a comprehensive growth plan, and we are looking for council for that. So all said, we're seeking opportunity to formally and fully communicate with council. I'd like to at this time make note in terms of support. We have received letters of support from Mono Mayor Laura Ryan to previous, which council has received previously, the previous council has received. I'll state in quote.
Aaron, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'll state in quote. She has indicated for your consideration, there are reports that need to undergo a rigorous peer review by independent experts. That has not occurred yet. And from Mark Early, the Mono CAO, a rigorous peer review is due to the lack of professional review, which has been completed by agencies as a result of the developer's LPAT repeal. So what are we seeking? We are seeking a formal letter of representation or a resolution of support that will ask for an adjournment of the February LPAT meeting. Mind you, in light of what Mr. Ward has mentioned, we feel that perhaps has been accomplished. Why is this necessary regardless? So that council has time to review and understand all the factors around this issue. We believe that an increase of density creates significant incongruities within the official town plan, which requires an update. And we also seek this because the reports previously presented so that can undergo a true independent peer review. Therefore, may I suggest to council that any letter of support or method of support ideally states an opposition to increase higher density development within the lands. We ask for support for the requirement of an independent peer review of all reports that have been given to council previously and that are forthcoming. And we ask for support of the delay of the LPAT determination, but again, referring to Mr. Ward, we believe that's occurred. That said, and I'll finish with this, how will this occur? We are hoping that council will strike a subcommittee to hear all the views. And let me emphasize that over the last weeks that we've spoken, there is support from council here for a subcommittee, simply because the councilors stated that you yourselves are looking for more information. Understanding how important this issue is, we think we all need more time to properly address this important issue. Anyways, Mr. Mayor, I'll end there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to start off here, but just saying thank you, Darren, for visiting with us. And I know you've talked to all the councilors in the past few days, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Some of these planning issues are beyond the scope of the town council. The planning process is something that is ongoing. We all know that our planning staff, our town staff, is concerned about all the issues that you've talked about, that through the planning process, all of those reports, traffic, environmental assessments, water issues, all have to be completed. If they haven't been, they will be, in due course. So I think, you know, my personal stand on this is that this is good development land, that land, you know, at some point through the course of the planning of it will eventually be developed. I'm not entirely in favor of increasing the density. Has been through the application process, so I would like to put it on record. I'd like to see it roll back a bit. You know, this is good developable land. It's been on the official plan for decades now. What the developer has put forward in their application, in my opinion, gives buffer to those around it, including the folks on Starview. The conservation lands are being dedicated to conservation. They've increased their parkland dedication, and I think the developer's been trying to work with this. We're also in a time now where we need more affordable housing. This is apartment buildings that are being proposed here and stacked townhouses. There are apartment buildings and stacked townhouses being planned for this property. This is, more affordable type of housing than detached homes. So I think, this is probably, and this is what has been planned for some time on these lands, and I would like to see the development of this land move forward. I'll pass it off to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess a comment and then a question, if that's okay, Your Worship, if Mr. Davidson. So first off, to the group that's here this evening, I've been to your meetings. There was numerous Friday nights during the campaign that I was there. What we've been asked to do this evening is to not weigh in, and I think that's appropriate given the positions that we have now. I mean, there's more at stake when you're sitting on council than when you're sitting on an election platform. But that being said, I'd like to let everybody know that my position has not changed, and that is that I'm sympathetic to the cause. So that being said, I guess my question for Mr. Davidson, what is the significance of an independent peer review? Like, what will it do for you and your group's concerns?
That, us coming here, we're not trying to delay the process. We're certainly just hoping that the process proceeds with proper understanding with this peer review. It's just so that all the reports can be understood thoroughly and properly. We've reviewed many of the reports, and we believe, again, there's incongruities and inconsistencies within the report. Within this short period of time we have here, I'd be more than willing to discuss those in detail with you, subject to, of course, the suggestion that we do strike a subcommittee to have further communication. I'll say this, without the peer review, we cannot be sure that omissions have occurred. By no means are we issuing a charge here. There's nothing about errors, but we want to make sure that no omissions have occurred. That's what I'll say to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you. I too also have concerns with this whole development. However, listening to Mr. Ward tonight, I believe it's best that we take his recommendation and don't officially comment on it. Again, I support your cause, and we'll leave it at that.
Any further comments from councillors here? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Taylor, and also Deputy Mayor McIntosh, for your comments, and thank you very much, Mr. Davidson, for your presentation. And again, being to the point, I've been a resident of the area for 25 years, specifically in that area, and again, through my dialogue with a number of people in the community, especially during the campaign, much was expressed. I respect the points of view from those of the community, and I feel that we, of course, are going to have more information provided. We do need more information provided to make the right decision moving forward. And again, following the guidelines and the information that we've been provided, I think that at this point I'll reserve any other comments. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Davidson, and everyone who's supporting him in the gallery. Putting your trust in him as the chair, obviously, to come and delegate tonight. Just, I guess, a question, and maybe this is getting into too much detail, but you allude to a triple win situation. Is that something that that you can disclose at the moment? Is this something that's in the works? I mean, obviously, there's several parties here to satisfy to find a solution. So maybe, are you able to expand on that, or?
Honestly, in the small amount of time we have, and I think it would be premature to get into those details. Specifically to the point is why we'd like to see some type of further discussion with council, communication with council. And again, I can't emphasize enough that if a subcommittee was struck, you would get all those answers. And we do believe there's options and alternatives available that have not been looked at and would not come to the table if it was not for this group to provide that win-win-win. We do believe it is our interest that the developers, the investors, get all that they want out of the lands. Again, we recognize, that council and investors must want to, need to see their full investment come to fruition. We have no problem with that. But again, we have alternatives and solutions for you.
Okay, well, understanding the relatively quick timeline, I suppose, you know, it's in the best interest of all parties involved to get some of those solutions to the table. Understanding that the LPAT hearing in February will not come to a specific resolution about the lands, I guess I would echo the planner in terms of council taking a stand to officially oppose the development. As you know, I also attended some of those meetings. I have a very strong environmental streak, and I'd like to see the most out of this land, whatever that solution happens to be. Given where we are in the planning process, some of these things may come to fruition, whether that's our ideal solution or not. But certainly I'll be pushing for the maximum environmental performance out of whatever development may hit those properties. But in the meantime, I see no harm in striking a committee and trying to get more ideas to the table. So I'm happy to make that motion if others would support me.
Thank you.
So your motion is to?
Probably out of the queue there, but I guess to strike a committee to gain public and private input on the development of the property in question. With the clerks.
I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. He's out of the queue. Mr. Ward, if you could speak to that. I mean, there's already been some public engagement on this matter. Will there be further public engagement?
To you, Your Worship, I would wonder what the focus and mandate of such a committee might entail. The applications have been and continue to go through a very rigorous review process from both technical agency standpoint, as well as public consultation being another very important component to this review process. The applications actually originated some time ago, back in 2011. They've advanced quite slowly, admittedly, through different versions of development concepts, et cetera. There's been several public information meetings. If it's of interest to council, you could certainly perhaps direct that another public open house or public information session be held at a future point in time if that's of interest. I would remind council, however, that given that it is before the tribunal, any such direction should go to them first for their, I guess, acceptance, and that would be something that the town would have to advance if that's of interest to council, and it would have to be basically approved by the direction of the tribunal at that point in time.
Right. Okay. No, we're going to go on to have our councillor post.
Thank you very much. That was my question as well, actually, to Mr. Ward and perhaps to Mr. Davidson, is what would the mandate of the committee be? Mr. Peters, or Councillor Peters, I'm definitely supportive of the idea of a subcommittee, but again, what would the mandate be? What would the makeup of the committee be? And to Mr. Ward, perhaps, is that an appropriate method to take while it is under an LPAT appeal process?
Through you, Your Worship, again, I would suggest that any interest in striking a committee is something that council should request staff to advance that sort of direction to the tribunal for consideration, and in doing so, we could then set aside some parameters as to what the composition of this committee might entail, what the focus would be, and so forth.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Peters, we typically are on the same side of these issues. I do share your interest in a subcommittee. I guess my angst would be at this time, if we had a subcommittee, you would have a councillor on that subcommittee, and the instructions that we've been given is this is probably not appropriate at this time. It does feel, as I sit here, I'm almost annoyed with myself that I'm suggesting that we be somewhat reserved and political in our responses, especially when I feel so strongly about an issue. But I feel it would be inappropriate to have a subcommittee that involves council on an issue like this at this time, and I'm sorry that that disappoints the gallery, and I'm happy to talk privately afterwards regarding that, but I just don't think it's a good idea for us to be involved at this time, especially considering what's involved. It's the future of Orangeville, and we can't afford to make a wrong decision here.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't have necessarily specific thoughts on its composition or mandate. I think at this point the motion would just be to strike the committee in the interest of exploring alternate solutions, and we would want that committee to be balanced. Whether or not it had to contain a councillor, I would ask, I suppose, the clerk or Mr. Jones if that's a requirement for a committee of council, because I agree. I'm not saying I want to jump in there and have influence over that committee, because that's not the case. You know, this role is much different, as you've said, Councillor Taylor. So I suppose if I could ask the clerk, if there is a requirement for a member of council to be on a committee, and then pending that answer, I guess my motion would stand.
What I was hearing from Mr. Ward was that we need to pass this by the LPAT tribunal, correct, Mr. Ward?
To your worship, that is correct. I would suggest that the tribunal does have a very good mechanism in place for mediation. That is something that the town could also explore with the applicant and the participants that have registered with respect to this hearing event. And through that essentially in a roundabout way formulates a committee in of itself, where, you know, we could look at what are the issues of concern and what are possible opportunities to resolve those issues to everyone's mutual satisfaction.
We have another council meeting on February the 11th. I'm wondering if we should, you know, task Mr. Ward with doing a little more homework on this and bringing back, realizing that the majority of councillors here would like to see some further public engagement, and perhaps Mr. Ward can come back to us with the path that we need to take for that. Would that be reasonable? Then on February the 11th, we can have another discussion about this issue, actually in advance of the February 28th LPAT hearing. Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I would just add to that, if that ends up being the direction, that the High Density Awareness Group and any other citizens having sort of a stake in this and having some creative ideas to bring forward, either have a delegation or send some of their concepts through to the town so that they can be considered by council and staff. Let's, you know, don't wait until the 28th if you have some ideas, because the clock kind of is ticking.
Right, and the only thing that I'd like to add to that is, you know, if you're going to challenge this, Darren, I think you need to get some professional expertise. You need, you know, you have to have some planning understanding, and I would recommend strongly that you get some professional planning expertise if you're going to look to be represented here at meetings here or at the LPAT hearing. So, yep, go ahead.
We've sought consultation from professionals, and we have their reports and their recommendations to us. And again, to your point, we're looking to put that on the official record, the public record, by virtue of some type of communication forum. Again, we're seeking leadership here from council. By no means am I suggesting that our way is the way to go. We're asking for your assistance in this. Whether your position is for or against, and it's not really about that, we are seeking the opportunity for communication. We simply want the voices of our group, the voices of the surrounding municipalities, the citizens of the municipalities, to have their reports and concerns put forward. And we're wondering how that might work. And if not subcommittee, then how?
Right. So I believe what we've come to here is an agreement that we're going to task Mr. Ward and staff to come back on February the 11th with a path to creating further public engagement here in Orangeville, and to have Mr. Davidson and other parties interested be part of this process. Is that correct, Mr. Peters? Can I have a second for that motion? Councillor Post. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Sherwood is opposed. Okay. Thank you, Darren. Okay. Next delegation, 6.23, Karen Bennett. She, due to weather, is... Oh, is she here? I'm sorry, Karen. It was the other delegation that hasn't. Okay. Karen Bennett, Senior Associate, GSAI. She's representing and is a planner representing Orangeville Highlands. Correct, Karen?
Thank you very much, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Karen Bennett. I'm a planner with Glenn Schnarr and Associates here tonight representing the owners of the lands subject to the discussion tonight so far. I'm pleased for the opportunity to speak to Council tonight. I'm not sure how to change the slide. Okay. The lands are owned, just a little bit of background, the lands are owned by Bruce Dale Investments, Inc., and Orangeville Highlands Limited. They have been owned by these companies since the 1980s and have been contemplated for development since that time. These are local, long-time developers in this area. They're not new to the community. And it is interesting to note these are the same owners that developed the Orangeville Mall in the 1970s. They have a proven track record of being proactive and working closely with the town, the community, and the Conservation Authority. And they have a vested interest in continuing to positively influence the future of Orangeville. The lands are on the north side of Hanson Boulevard, east of the Amelia Street extension. They're 44 acres in size, and about 29 acres of which are developable. Right now, they're vacant, and they have the temporary dog park on site. Applications were originally filed in 2010 for this property. There have been several iterations of the draft plan over the years in response to comments. We acknowledge that density proposed for this development has been the subject of public comments, and we wish to clarify that this plan was designed in response to and specifically to implement the town's official plan. As background, after release of the 2006 growth plan, the County of Dufferin undertook a growth management implementation study to implement the provincial growth initiatives to ensure that the county could meet the province's targets set for them. This county study concluded that overall, residential densities needed to increase across the county in order to meet the provincial density and population targets. In 2008, the town of Orangeville reviewed the required policy and density requirements emerging from those documents and determined that an update to the town's official plan was needed to bring more ambitious density targets to achieve that increased density. And through the introduction of a new minimum density for the subject lands to establish a minimum density of 75 units per hectare and a maximum of 99 units per hectare on these lands. This resulted in OPA 103, approved in 2009, which was the Town of Orangeville Council's response to the county's growth management report and the county official plan density and population targets. The form of build-out proposed for this site, consisting of apartments and townhouses, is directly reflective of satisfying council's vision and the prescribed minimum density for this site. The current draft plan proposes a density of 97 units per hectare, which is in conformity with the town's vision and official plan policy applicable to the subject lands. A number of technical reports were prepared to support the draft plan resubmission last year. All of these reports provided technical support for the development proposal, including demonstrating there would be no adverse impacts to the environment, traffic, groundwater, and surface water. And where comments from the public and from the circulated agencies and the town departments have asked for further clarification, we are currently providing that, pulling it all together for a resubmission for the near future. We did have a formal meeting, a formal public meeting in September. We did receive most of our comments from the circulated agencies in the town. We're still waiting for one set of comments. And we are currently preparing a resubmission to address all technical comments, including those received from members of the public at the September public meeting. The limits of development for this property have been staked and surveyed on site with participation from the town, the Credit Valley Conservation Authority, and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and these are reflected on the draft plan. In addition, we have implemented a 30-meter buffer to the provincially significant wetland and a 10-meter buffer to all other features on site, including the drip line and the flood line. Right now, the CVC is undertaking a vigorous review of the ecological aspects of the proposal through the EIS, the hydrogeological study, the geotechnical study, on behalf of the town of Orangeville and the town of Mono. Regarding traffic, there was a peer review undertaken of our traffic impact study by Triton Engineering, who were retained by the town, and our next resubmission will address those comments, including assessing intersections with First Street, because we heard this comment at the public meeting. I'm just going to close with a rendering of the a conceptual rendering of the site layout. It is intended that the apartment buildings be oriented close to Hanson Boulevard to take advantage of the town's transit system and walkability to shopping. We have also proposed to maintain the dog park, but relocate it more central to the property. We're preserving the conservational lands along the northern portion of the property, and we're proposing a stormwater management pond along the eastern part of the property. We also note that we heard comments regarding the architectural design of the apartments at the September public meeting, and we are preparing an urban design brief to come in with our resubmission to look at the design principles and objectives for the buildings. That's my presentation. I'm here if there's any questions at all.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions from councillors? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Karen. 6.24, delegation. Karen Morrison, again, to talk about Orangeville Highlands.
This is on. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for giving Starview delegation time to speak about the proposed Highlands high-density development. Although we reside in Mono, we have been working and collaborating with the many concerned residents of Orangeville and neighboring municipalities. As neighbors to this development, we share many of the same concerns, and we recognize that access to safe drinking water, increased traffic, pollution, and the stresses on our environment impact all of us. Development decisions of this magnitude in a provincially significant wetland need and must include rigorous and independent peer review, studies of the hydrogeological, traffic, and environmental impacts. Studies managed and paid for by the developer need careful inspection and examination. As mentioned, the Highlands high-density development will sit in a provincially significant wetland complex, and its footprint, configuration, and proposed density will have life-lasting impacts on our watershed. Our forests, Island Lake, the Credit and Nottawasaga rivers, and those watercourses that nourish and feed them, in this case, Lower and Middle Monora Creek. Every 5 years, Credit Valley Conservation releases a watershed health report card to those municipalities responsible for caring for their watershed and the Credit River. The study focuses on the surface water quality, groundwater quality, and forest conditions. In 2018, the Town of Orangeville report card was downgraded from a B to a C. This is a concern because our long-term health depends on a healthy watershed. So what does a C mean to the future of our water and our health? In December 2015, Source Water Protection issued a map showing the areas in Dufferin County under significant water quantity threats, meaning the water taking is more than the wells can supply. Orangeville, Mono, and Amaranth were all highlighted on that map. And in December 2018, Credit Valley Conservation reported that current municipal data shows average chloride or salt concentrations in our water wells has increased over 125%. in the last 15 years. Fully 50% of salt runoff comes from parking lots, and another 20 to 30% from roads. Salt runoff contaminates our soil and gets into our groundwater and wells, turning drinking water saltier and potentially exacerbating health issues like diabetes and heart problems. Our communities and economies are supported by functions provided by our watershed. And there is a direct link between public well-being and the health of our watershed. We ask the new mayor, new council, and new planner to look at this failing grade as an opportunity to do business differently. Any development, and in particular this high-density development that sits between two important cold water creeks like Middle and Monora Creek, must include the highest level of low-impact development and green infrastructure. Underground parking, green roofs, rain gardens, rain harvesting, and natural areas have all been proven to help with water quantity and water quality. As neighboring residents of this proposed development, we wonder why there has never been an impact study on our wells. Who is responsible for our drinking water when we share the same aquifer?
Karen, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Currently, there is no information on the parking plan, number of bedrooms, square footage, building materials, land and street parking, and price point for this development. We have no idea if 1,500 or 3,000 people will live here. What does this mean for traffic, schools, hospital, emergency response, and recreation? The traffic study is incomplete and does not include Starview, Highway 10, and First Street. We are not anti-development, and we understand the need for mixed housing. However, we cannot begin to know the real impacts of this development without having all the information necessary. We believe the new mayor, councillors, staff, and public need and deserve the whole puzzle, not just a piece of the puzzle. We request that the town of Orangeville issue a rigorous third-party independent study, peer review of hydrogeological, traffic, and environmental impacts. Third-party independent means it isn't managed by the developer. We ask that Orangeville request an adjournment, and in light of what Mr. Ward said, may not be necessary, for LPAT. Until such studies are completed and reviewed, we need time. We ask the town of Orangeville to say no to the increased density. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for your concern, Karen. As you know, Ms. Bennett said that many of the concerns that were brought up in the September meeting at Tony Rose are being addressed by the planner, and they're doing some additional due diligence. Respect your concern and wish for peer review, and that'll something that town staff will have to consider going forward, so thank you. Any questions or comments from councillors? None. Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Mr. Taylor.
It feels disingenuous of me just to sit up here and not comment. And I hope, Ms. Morrison, that you would understand what council's been instructed and what the situation that we find ourselves in as we approach this. I guess I just personally want to say, and I think I speak for the rest of us sitting up here, is we're listening. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Unfortunately, our next presentation, Lura Consulting, was not able to make it due to the inclement weather. So we're going to move on to item 7, statutory public meeting. This is a discussion of a zoning bylaw amendment application, file number Z2-18, Faulkner Courtyard, Inc., regarding 15 Faulkner Street. I want to ask anyone who speaks or wants to be notified for further discussions of this topic by council to complete the notification list on the table. Madam Clerk, do we have a notification list? It's outside? We do have one? It's out in the lobby? I'm sorry? Okay, so if you wish further information on this particular item on 15 Faulkner Street, you can fill out our list out in the lobby. At this point, we'll move along to presentation by town planning staff regarding this zoning bylaw amendment application. Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening to yourself, members of council, members of the public in attendance, and those viewing online, and staff. The statutory public meeting that you have before you and the application before you this evening under the Planning Act is being held this evening concerning lands located at 15 Faulkner Street. The application is for a zoning bylaw amendment for the development of a 5-story, 46-unit multiple dwelling, otherwise an apartment building. The zoning bylaw amendment application seeks a site-specific rezoning from the current RM1 zone in our zoning bylaw, which is Special Provision 2447, to a site-specific RM1 zone, effectively to achieve two things. And I'll touch on those two provisions that are proposed to be amended in just a moment later in the presentation. Just for some context, and for those viewing online and in the room this evening, the subject lands, again, are located at 15 Faulkner Street, which is the area here highlighted in red. The existing development on the lands is a 2-story, 17-unit apartment building, surrounded to the north and south by low-density residential land uses, to the east by medium-density residential land uses, further to the east by quite a large apartment building, in fact, a high-density residential development, and generally to the northwest and southeast by institutional land uses like ODSS and other community services as well, and within close proximity as well to the downtown core. The actual subject lands you can see identified again in the outlined area. The existing development is, as I say, an apartment building. You can see the lands are generally covered by either the structure itself or surface asphalt parking. Areas to the north include a landscape buffer, to the south abutting the low-density residential land uses, also by a landscape buffer. A circular, semicircular driveway provides access to the existing development. The proposed development is intended to be situated in roughly the same development footprint as the existing building, but with a 5-story structure rather than a 2, and culminating in an increase in the number of units from 17 to a maximum of 46 apartment dwelling units. Again, just for some context, these are summer photos taken last year, just showing the lot and the existing development from a variety of vantage points. Fairly self-explanatory. The structures on the property include, again, the apartment building, an accessory structure, which is indicated here, detached garage. Those two structures, as well as all of the other remaining structures, including the covered patio area, effectively all structures are proposed for demolition as part of the proposed development. And it should be noted as well that the existing structure is located or is indicated on the town's municipal register for heritage properties. So further applications would come before council pending approval of this application at a later date. You can see again some of the buffering, as I mentioned earlier. I point that out because quite a few of the comments that we've received from public thus far have concerned items such as landscape open space, the existing buffer that exists, and a desire to maintain that as much as possible in the new development. Again, just showing the adjacent and surrounding development, including the residential land uses to the east, which include a medium density development, other medium density development located to the east, and different vantage points of the existing structure, which again has been identified on the Heritage Register and is slated for demolition as part of a future application. Just going through quickly the existing policy framework. The existing property is designated medium density residential in our official plan. That mirrors medium density residential designation to the east. Again, low density designations to the northwest and the south, with more institutional type land uses shown in the designations to the northwest and the southeast. As there is currently a medium density residential designation in place per our official plan, and the proposed development is a medium density residential development in accordance with the official plan, there is no official plan amendment required, and nor is there an official plan amendment proposed or submitted at this time. The application is a zoning amendment to implement the policies of the official plan. We've received several comments about the increase in density. I just wanted to point out to council and other members who've provided the comment that under the official plan, under the medium density residential designation, there is a maximum permitted residential density permitted of 99 units per hectare. And you can see with the slide here, the applicant with the 46 units that they are proposing falls just under that maximum permitted density. So no official plan amendment is required. Another overview of the official plan policies will also show it conforms in some other areas, including the location within the built boundary, where our official plan provides a particular emphasis on medium density residential and intensification where appropriate. That will all be part of the review of staff going forward. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide a general overview for council and for members of the public. The zoning, as I say, it is a site-specific medium density residential zone as now. The site-specific nature of the zoning states that on the property as is, a maximum of 17 units are permitted with a maximum height of 14 meters in our current zoning bylaw. The applicant is seeking 2 amendments to the zoning bylaw to increase that maximum number of units to 46 and to increase the maximum building height from 14 meters, which otherwise would be permitted in the zoning, to 18 meters, or a 5-story building. This slide generally summarizes that point. It should be noted that the existing zoning has been in place for roughly 30 years. November of 1989 was when the site-specific zoning was first put in place. Also, as part of the application will be the placing of a holding symbol on the lands, whereby future council approval will be required to remove the hold. The hold will effectively keep the development of the property in static until the hold is removed. The criteria to remove the hold will be for the applicant to demonstrate that appropriate services are in place, i.e. water and sanitary, to appropriately service the proposed development of 46 units. This is the site plan that has been submitted. The purpose of this slide is to show that in all other respects, including minimum required setbacks, in lot coverage, in parking, the proposed development does comply with the zoning bylaw. The applicant is seeking, again, just the 2 amendments to the zoning bylaw for maximum permitted dwellings on the property, and building height. And again, I stress that these are conceptual building elevations. The actual architectural details of the development will be subject of further staff review at site plan stage. We will be reviewing, along with the building elevations and architectural design, we will be reviewing other matters such as lighting, landscaping and buffering, overall grading and drainage to ensure that there are no impacts to adjacent neighbors and that the overall development is appropriate and attractive for this key area of town. And again, from other vantage points, you can see a 5-story building. Should be noted that just per our bylaw, the 18-meter height would be measured midway between the peak of this roof and the eave of this mansard-style roof. The height of the mechanical or elevator feature is not included in height. As I say, we have received several comments in response to the circulation of this application from external agencies, internal departments. Those will be reviewed in more detail in a report to council coming forward. And to generally summarize public comments, we have received several with respect to items related to architectural and site design, runoff, fencing, tree removal and replanting, buffering, shadowing. Several of these, I should note, are more appropriate to be reviewed at site plan stage, but certainly it gives council an early look at some of the land use impacts that may result from the development of this site for the intended use. Next steps from staff will be to conclude the public meeting this evening, bring from this public meeting comments received by the members of the public and council, to consider those in our further review and to prepare a future staff report for council review and consideration, along with an amending zoning bylaw at a later time. It should be noted that we will rigorously review all public comments and council comments, and we'll bring a staff report back to council until those comments have been addressed. That concludes my presentation this evening. I should note the applicant's agent is in attendance, also has a presentation following me. I will leave this slide for council and members of the public review. It summarizes the specifics of the amendments being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. My only comment I've got is, as I look at this site plan, it looks like it's all hard surfaces. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about below-grade parking with this development?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, there has been. And the applicant's agent can discuss that in more detail. But certainly we acknowledge that there is quite a bit of impervious surface. Our preference is to not have as much as that. So that is an ongoing discussion with the applicant and staff, I can assure you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and to Mr. Dixon. Thank you very much for that presentation, thorough and very helpful. Just a couple of points, and again, based on the footprint, pleased to see that there is a buffer zone. I think that as with any existing development and any existing structure, I think that it's imperative that we end up respecting the fact that we do have a buffer zone to, of course, lessen maybe some of the impact. And I don't know if it's fair to ask at this point, because you did make a reference to the fact that further consultation and input is going to be coming, but I saw one point there about the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board. Can you comment to that concern, or at least their question that may have been posed in this case?
I certainly can, through Your Worship, to Councillor Andrews. Is it the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board? So I noted the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board has provided us standard conditions of approval. Those are conditions of approval that they would include in any comments. If they had no comments, they would provide conditions of approval that they wish to see incorporated into a future development agreement. In this case, it would be a site plan agreement. That would be the next opportunity we would have to be able to incorporate their conditions of approval. their conditions, I don't know offhand, but typically a condition from the school board would be a matter related to school busing, for instance, and that would be reflected in the site plan agreement.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Mayor Brown, to Mr. Dixon. You mentioned in your report that the property is on the Municipal Register of Non-Designated Properties of Cultural Heritage, and that the demolition application would have to go to the Heritage Orangeville for comment. Slide 14 of your presentation indicates some of the agencies that you've reached out to, and I would assume that Heritage Orangeville was one of those. And am I right in reading here that they provided no comment? And I guess my follow-up on that is that I'm wondering if it should be resubmitted since these committees will be restruck in the future.
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, upon receipt of the residential demolition application, it will be circulated certainly to Heritage Orangeville for review and comment. It will be included on one of their future committee meetings. The residential demolition application has not been received. The zoning amendment application has been received only. There will be a need for the applicant to submit a residential demolition application and other planning applications, quite frankly, at a later time. But the actual residential demolition application would be the applications that is received by and reviewed by Heritage Orangeville. It has not been received as yet.
Has not been received by the town from the Heritage Committee? Sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, the applicant has not submitted the residential demolition application at this stage. It is not uncommon for an applicant to seek their planning approvals first, secure some level of planning approvals prior to proceeding with more applications to come. I can't speak for the applicant's strategy and what their thoughts are on that, but we have not received that residential demolition application as yet. They could submit it, and that would be circulated to Heritage Orangeville upon receipt, but I suspect that they may be holding off until the zoning is in place.
Okay, so my confirmation is that they will get future notification when the new committee is struck.
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, yes, upon receipt they certainly will be circulated, and we would not proceed until we have comments from Heritage Orangeville.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sort of off the top, I think this site is prime for intensification. The official plan, while it hasn't been updated, does have that target of 50% within the built boundary. This is obviously within that zone. Traffic look favorable, that sort of thing. But to build off your comments, Mr. Mayor, on the parking, can you confirm the value that was used or the applicable parking bylaw for this site?
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor Peters, the total number of parking spaces that are proposed is 69 parking spaces at a ratio of 1.5 per unit, which complies with the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, and if you don't mind a follow-up. I know that the town has sort of a cash in lieu bylaw for the implementation of green measures. To my knowledge, that has not been implemented on the scale of a development such as this. It's probably a discussion to have moving forward, but I would obviously advocate for as progressive of a building with respect to environmental performance as possible, be it through that cash in lieu bylaw or some other means.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Dixon. A lot of these things have been said, but I just think it's really important. I did follow up with Mr. Jones ahead of time asking about parking spaces. It wasn't clear to me what is required, and as I understand it, this development is absolutely hitting the 1.5 parking spaces. It does seem odd to me, candidly, as a new councillor sitting up here, that we would have 1.5. To me, most families have 2, and I don't know. To me, it would be better if we could get to 2, but unfortunately, it meets the zoning bylaws of the town. It just seems strange. So as a comment, number 2 would be, do we have any neighborhood concerns regarding the height of the building? It does seem quite high for that area, and it will be essential that it fits in with the neighborhood. And I'll just continue on if I could. So there's that. The landscaping piece, love the pictures of what the development could look like. I do hope that those trees that are going to be in there aren't going to be twigs and will fit in with the area that we have. It's an older area of town, and it should be aesthetically pleasing to everyone. So I hope that will be of the utmost concern. And the last piece, to Councillor Sherwood's position, the Heritage Orangeville Committee is a very vibrant committee within this town. As I look at the building and as I drove by and did my own little site visits, I'm certainly not an expert. I did not think it was a heritage building as I saw it. It doesn't scream that way for me. However, I would be greatly interested in seeing what Linda Addy and her group have to say about this building before I gave any sort of vote in approval of it going forward. So thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Through you to Mr. Dixon. What's the estimated timeline? Like, right now this building's occupied, I assume. So we've got approximately 40 people living in this building that's going to be demolished. When everything's said and done, how much in your expertise or experience is going to be given to these people to find new residences?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor McIntosh, there is a legislative requirement for the landowner to provide notice of relocation. They will have to adhere to that on their own right. In terms of when you could anticipate as council to get a report back from us, it is difficult to say at this stage. To Councillor Taylor's point and further to yours, we have had actually some neighborhood concerns, and we will need to address those before we feel comfortable to bring a report back to council. We have had some issues peripheral to the issues of height, and we believe largely those could be mitigated through building design, which is a site plan matter. But we will be discussing those further with the applicant. Depending on how those discussions go, we'll largely steer how quickly we can get a report back to council. But I can assure you and those in attendance and watching from home, we will not bring a report back to council until those have been addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from councillors? Mr. Dixon, thank you. Now, we have Mr. Bob Long from Long Environmental Consultants on behalf of the applicant, Faulkner Courtyard, Inc. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I had some lung surgery a few years ago, and it's affected my voice, so I had a vocal cord surgery, and it seems to have helped it a bit.
I think we can hear you fine, Mr. Long.
I can come through nice and clear. So I represent Faulkner Courtyard, and Mr. Paul Rasciuto, one of the principals, is with me this evening. Drove all the way from Vaughan, despite my suggestion he not try it. Mm-hmm. We have appreciated the support of your staff. They've been helpful as we worked our way through this application since last June. The report you've just seen illustrates the features of the site and the significant building my client is prepared to invest in Orangeville. We think it will improve the aesthetics of the property, provide more necessary rental accommodation, and it includes major setbacks for the buildings, albeit the parking requirement uses up a lot of the site. Also, in accordance with the county official plan, the 10-year will continue to be rental rather than condominium. I tend to describe the zoning a little differently than the planner did. The site is designated multiple residential, and the site is zoned multiple residential. But at the time the council did that zoning, it decided it wanted to put the use of the property in accordance with the zoning bylaw on hold until we went through this step, site plan step, and so on. And so what we've applied to do really is to remove that special provision, which restricts the height of the building and the number of units, and to implement the zoning bylaw. The height of the building, I guess our perspective showed a mansard roof, and So the interpretation of the height is a little different, but the existing Feed Street apartment building is 15 meters. And despite the bylaw being 14, and I don't think the bylaw is completely clear on whether or not the elevator penthouses are included, but they would typically be about 3 meters. So as we work through this application, certainly a 15-meter height would be sufficient for a 5-story building, provided it doesn't affect the elevator penthouses. Now, as the planner indicated, you received 6 comments from some of the neighbors, and in fairness to them, we thought we'd like to address them now, although they will be addressed probably in more detail later. And part of our response, because there are traffic implications, is an October 2018 traffic study completed for the town by Triton at the request of the school board. The board wanted a more detailed modeling of traffic, and so Triton did that, including traffic counts at the intersections. One of the main issues raised by the neighbors was the need for family housing, and we recognize that. You just heard about a family housing development that's somewhat different. The town has designated areas for townhouses and single-family homes. This property is intended to be a medium-density apartment area. Affordable apartment buildings are typically provided with surface parking, and the parking proposed is in accordance with the bylaw. Another issue was air quality and noise related to the traffic. And again, the Triton report describes the considerable traffic caused by the Orangeville District Secondary School and generated by the Tony Rose Center. For example, on Faulkner Street, Triton reported the afternoon peak hour traffic is 111 vehicles. My client's development will add 5. The Feed Street traffic is much higher, which Triton forecast at the peak hour at 240 vehicles, and that includes our 3 vehicles. And so the Triton report indicates that the impact of the apartment building on traffic is imperceptible, and that would relate to the associated noise and air quality. Sun shading was also a concern, and that's a fair one. And we've been monitoring the shading from the existing Feed Street apartment building since last June 21st. On June 21st, when the summer sun is at its highest, the shadow north of the building was 8 meters. I measured it personally. And so the shadow in the midsummer sun would be retained on the property. Spring and fall shading would extend a little farther, a couple of meters into the backyards on the adjacent properties on Feed Street. And midwinter shading would extend as far as the houses on the north side of the property on the south side of Feed Street. So my client purchased this property in 2004 with the objective to redevelop it when it becomes feasible to a high-quality apartment building in accordance with the zoning bylaw. They're now prepared to make this investment, subject to your approval of the zoning, service allocations, site plan, and landscaping. We would be pleased to answer any questions.
Councilors, do you have any questions for Mr. Long? Councilor Peters.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Long, there has been a lot of discussion about parking, as you've heard. Could you speak to sort of standard market rates for this type of development? Are people renting in medium density, 5, 6 story apartments? Are they requesting 2 spaces? Is the 1.5, at market expectations? Would going lower be permissible to the development?
I'm afraid I can't answer that, Your Worship. I know the bylaw for years has been at 1.5, and in some cases, applicants have requested a reduction of that. We're prepared to meet the 1.5 requirement, but that's a fully developed, fully paved site.
Is there a particular target market Mr. Long? Are you thinking about seniors for
Not
this
yet,
building?
no.
or- No.
The market would be the same market that the building currently serves, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments
Right.
with surface parking. If we start to get into larger apartments and underground parking, that's a different, higher market.
Right, right. Okay, councilors have any further questions for Mr. Long? I'd like to invite questions or comments from the public regarding this application. Is anybody here who would like to speak to or ask questions? Ma'am, could you step up?
Stay here because I didn't expect to
Oh,
do any talking.
okay. Or you can take the chair there. Could you please give us your name and your address, please?
I'm Alice Russell. We own the property south of this apartment that they want to build 5 stories.
So you're on McCarthy Street, are you?
McCarthy and Faulkner on the corner.
On the corner, okay.
My question when I put my hand up, did you receive our letter that we spent time writing, and we addressed it to Mayor Williams and the town council on July the 31st, 2018? Did
Well,
you
just
see
a
that at
moment.
all?
There is one letter here, just a moment. But that's from another party, is it? Yeah, sorry, we've got a letter here from January 24th, 2019. Unfortunately, nobody signed it. We don't know who the letter's from. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk?
Sorry to interrupt. We do know who it was from, but we weren't able to reach them to get their permission to release their information. But it was not from Mrs. Russell.
Right. So, I'm sorry, Mrs. Russell, we do not have your letter.
Oh, golly.
Yeah. And you sent it to Mayor Williams back
Mayor
in
Williams.
when was that?
Council, and I was advised to do that.
Yes.
We've been on our property 61 years.
Wow. Fantastic.
My husband had a practice in dentistry, and we were on
Could you go to the microphone, please, Mrs. Russell? Thank you.
I didn't want to be talking.
We need.
Fine.
Yeah, we need to hear you. Sorry. Thank you.
What did I say?
You've been there for 61 years. Your husband had a dental practice.
Right.
Right.
At 6 years on Broadway.
Yes.
And then we moved and had our office and our home
Yes.
there for 61 years.
Yes.
Johnny retired after, he retired in 97.
Right.
He was 70 years old at the time.
Right.
So take a guess how old I am, but anyways. Anyways, we did spend time on this letter. I think it was a fair letter and our opinion about this rezoning.
Right.
And that was dated July the 31st, 2018.
Well, we'd be happy to receive the letter again, and we'll make sure that our staff gets that letter. So,
Now,
thank you.
can I give you a copy of it?
Yes, please.
Now?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything further to say, Mrs. Russell?
I wish Johnny could be here.
Right.
He's not in the best of health.
Right.
And so I said I'd come on with my son-in-law. And we're concerned, and you would think at our age, what the heck? How long are we going to be here? But we are concerned. We want the right thing done.
Right.
We're concerned about the parking. We've had water in our basement because of runoff. I have written to the owners a couple of times, no response.
Right. Okay.
So we're just concerned. We want it done right. They did cut a lot of trees there last year. I was so sad to see that.
Right. Okay.
So I think, that's about it.
Right.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
thank you for bringing that to our attention, and our staff will review your letter.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any further questions for Mr. Long or Mr. Dixon? We have another person that would like to speak to this. Yes, ma'am. Your name and your address, please?
I'm Bethany Como. I'm at 16 Faulkner, directly across the street.
Yes.
On Faulkner. And I'm one of the ones that actually has expressed that I'm fully aware of the housing crisis in Canada, let alone Ontario, let alone Orangeville.
Yes.
We've helped out a few neighbors from directly next to us when they were evicted from certain premises, and we actually took them in and helped them out because they could not find a place to live, so we understand that.
Thank you.
But I agree with my neighbor, I see quite often on the corner. We have a very tight neighborhood. We have a very close neighborhood. And to simply build upwards, you know, it is going to affect my tiny little house that's directly in front. Not quite sure why we weren't captured in the pictures. We are directly across the street. My neighbors are here that are right next to me as well. It's the same situation. To have something so large go up, and it may only sound like a couple of meters, I have difficulty believing that. I can appreciate not wanting to include the penthouse. I do, because it's going to be in my field of vision. It's going to be blocking my house. It's going to be cutting off my view of the sky. We moved to Orangeville purposely 3 years ago, my husband and I, from Alberta, and we picked Orangeville over top of Innisfil, Barrie, Alliston. We looked everywhere for a good 6 months. We chose Orangeville, and we chose our house because we were aware of the bylaws. We were aware of the apartment buildings next to us and across. We were fully aware of that. We know a lot of our neighbors, but we do not want the height. We don't want the extra traffic. I'm not quite sure how doubling the occupancy there is only going to bring 5 more cars during peak. We're there. We live there every day. We know the busyness when school's in and out. And we're right. There's a lot of school kids walking to school, so we have concerns about their safety as well. But for me and my tiny little house right across the street, it is going to be very impactful to us and to the neighborhood and to the people that share our neighborhood. And, you know, we're all here. We want the right thing, the right decision, take our time, give us some specs. You know, we're open-minded. You know, why not condo development? Why not another co-op housing development? Maybe something 3 stories that's more palatable. I've heard talk of above-ground parking. We don't want to have that, don't need to have that shining in our house. The way the land is graded, our house is actually quite a bit below. Yeah, at least it feels that way with a building that high. So we do have some very relevant concerns, and I did put my letter in. I got acknowledgement that it was received, so I do thank you for that. And thanks for letting us come and talk tonight, because it is important. We care about our little neighborhood and our little street. There's been significant development at the end of our street on the corner of Feed and Faulkner, 2 brand new homes that have gone in there. I know my neighbors and I were renovating our homes, we're doing our landscaping, we're doing the right thing, and we just want to make sure that it's done right and done properly.
Right.
Okay.
That's a nice neighborhood there.
It's wonderful. It's a beautiful old neighborhood, and I guarantee you, we go up to Broadway, and we're up there all the time participating and deeply entrenched in the neighborhood. So we want to keep it that way, and it'd be nice to attract some more families to the neighborhood. The residents, from what I can tell right across the street, they're not families. You know, they are some, you know, single people, which is fine, but it'd be nice if we could attract some families, and because that's really what the affordable housing aspect should be about, is about the families that can't afford it, or single parents. You know, that needs to be our focus.
Right.
So I thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much for your letter. Appreciate that. Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Long, were there any comments or other submissions to you?
No, Your Worship. This is the first public exposure we've had, and the clerk did provide us with copies of the letters, but with all the details of the authors redacted, so we don't know who wrote them or where they live. This is the beginning of a public process, it's a long way till the end.
Yes.
And there are issues you've heard about to be resolved.
Great, thank you.
In a previous life, I was a water resources engineer, and I know there are a lot of different ways of paving properties and controlling runoff, that sort of thing. But as I said, there's a lot of work to be done between my client and the staff and the neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so to finish up this item, we have this report, ISPL 2019-005 zoning bylaw amendment application to be received. May I have a motion? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor of receiving this report? Carried unanimously. Moving on our agenda, we have no consent motions. We have no staff reports. We have no committee or board meetings. And question period. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to ask questions at this time? No. We have correspondence. We've received from the town of Shelburne 12.1 resolution of support for municipal voters list. Now, is this a motion to receive this information, Madam Clerk? Okay, and we also have correspondence at 12.2 from the town of Mono, a letter regarding the Orangeville Highlands development. So may I have a motion to receive those two pieces of correspondence from Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Received unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we have an information item, Town of Mono, regarding draft bill 66. Again, recommendation that the information items be listed above be received. A motion from Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Receiving this motion, passed unanimously. Okay, we now have a notice of motion given prior to this meeting. This is Article 4.1 of our agenda, Councillor Sherwood regarding dog license fees. And the motion states that the staff be directed to review dog license fees and report back to council. Councillor Sherwood, would you like to talk to this item?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak on this this item. I know we are currently renegotiating our service agreement with the Ontario Humane Society, and I thought it might be ample time as well to review the dog license fees, only because I believe, Madam Clerk, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the last time they were reviewed was 2003. So I think it's probably a good time to see, are we in line with what our neighbors are doing and what type of fees we're looking. We may not have any changes at all, but I think having building it in with the contract renegotiation at the same time might be a good time to do that.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Sherwood that staff be directed to review dog license fees and report back to council. Can I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, all in favor? And passed unanimously. Item 15. I don't believe, we do have a notice of motion? Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make two notices of motion, if I could, please. The first one, which I'd like to discuss at our next council meeting, is I've written it out here, so if it's okay, I'll read it. I'll just read it out. So, whereas the protection of the safety of our citizens on residential streets is a paramount concern for our residents, and whereas the Settlers Creek subdivision has witnessed increased traffic and incidents of speeding since the opening of Spencer Avenue to Riddell Road, and whereas significant concerns have been raised by residents and was an election issue during the recent municipal campaign, and whereas Orangeville Police have increased the charges laid from 42 in 2017 to 116 charges laid in 2018, and whereas consultations with town staff and the Orangeville Police regarding the implementation of traffic calming measures such as speed bumps, additional stop signs, increased police presence, and speed reductions have been implemented, it has been determined that the most prudent option is speed reduction and police enforcement. Therefore, I would like to make a motion that the following reductions to speed be made and that signage changes be enacted within a reasonable period of time. The first one is Spencer Avenue from Riddell Road to B-Line be adjusted to 40 kilometers an hour and that it be designated a community safety zone. And the second one is Alder Street from Riddell Road to B-Line be adjusted to 40 kilometers an hour. And that is my first notice of motion.
Okay. can we have, that's just be received by Madam Clerk. Do you want to go ahead with your second notice of motion, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to submit the following. Excuse me for just a second. Whereas the recent budget items regarding community grants created some confusion regarding the criteria for eligibility for community grants, whereas the community grant items created division within council regarding the approval of said community grants, I would like to make a motion that council instruct town staff to review and provide an updated community grants program criteria for council's consideration in future years, and that the agreed upon criteria be posted for all community groups when putting in their submission. And that's the end of my 2 notices of motion.
Okay, thank you. I also would like to make a draft, a motion. And I'm going to read this out to councillors and the public. That council approve a one-time grant of $15,000 to the Dufferin Board of Trade to be funded from tax levy to assist with the following initiatives. $12,000 for skilled trades to educate youth, parents, and those looking to retrain in the skilled trades and connect them with Dufferin County employers. And a second sum of $3,000, again, to be given to the Dufferin Board of Trade for film and television office to showcase Orangeville and Dufferin County locations to production companies. That is my motion, and since we're in budget times, I'm hoping that somebody would second that motion. Deputy McIntosh. Any comments on this? Councillor Andrews. Sorry.
That's okay. Through you, Your Worship, I was going to speak to Councillor Taylor's motion, but since you happen to have this particular motion on the table and one that's very close to my other professional life, I truly support this particular request. I think that for those of us who have dealt with the absence of those that are pursuing the trades, I think that we're in a situation where there is a desperate need, not only locally but also provincially and also nationally, to educate those that need to be educated. And again, we've had numerous discussions offline and other forums, but I feel that this particular opportunity is one that needs to be put forth, and certainly endorse the support from the Dufferin Board of Trade, knowing the expertise that exists in-house with the team that they have there. I would be a firm supporter of this particular motion.
Thank you very much.
Now, could I continue?
Can you go back in the queue for a second? Let me, oh, you've, okay, go right ahead. Councillor Andrews.
To Councillor Taylor's first motion, knowing the area, I'm not a resident of that area. I spoke earlier at this council meeting, and for those that were watching online, but I am very familiar with the traffic issues and the speed of which those that have been pursuing that route, in fact, both, you know, you're talking about Alder and Spencer. My concern, of course, is not only the route that is from, as we would say, from the east to the west, but also from the west east, and especially with Spencer's, the Spencer Public School there. I would firmly support that motion. And the second one that you have also, I feel very strongly about your point too, about the community grants, and I feel that having staff provide maybe a refresher on the criteria would be very helpful for council moving forward, because again, not to say that there were some complexities in trying to figure it all out. I think the amount of information, and there are a number of community groups who step forward who are certainly worthy of receiving some form of funding, but I think that the criteria could be maybe refreshed in some way to help us out in any other future decisions.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I suppose, a question regarding the motion. Do you anticipate other funding sources? Has the county been approached? How do you see turning this into a larger scale initiative?
The county will be approached as well for a similar amount of money, $15,000 to help fund both the Skilled Trades Initiative and the Film and Television Office Initiative. We've had comment and participation from a number of employers, and it's our intention once a mock website gets set that we'll be able to reach out to employers looking for some monetary commitment. They're the ones that we're trying to create a benefit for in terms of additional skilled employees, and the parties that have participated and have indicated that they will. Dufferin Board of Trade has also submitted applications for summer employment grants. I believe there's 3 or 4 that they've applied for students to work over the summer on both of these projects. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so back to Councillor Taylor's notice of motion. They've been received. There's nothing further to say on those. I'm sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to understand, so we're still in notice of motion, so you're actually making a notice of motion for next meeting, correct? Or would we
Well,
wait?
I think we're trying to squeeze this into our budget discussions for today. So, and I may be jumping the queue here because we're not yet into budget discussion.
No problems. We're just about there. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't waiting for next week for a reaction to that.
No, I'm trying to.
You want to put it in for tonight.
I think this is a really important issue. You know, it's something I've been talking about for several months, and it's been certainly nationally, even throughout North America, the need to help train young people in skilled trades. These type of jobs are ones that can't be exported. When you're doing manual labor, whether it's electrician or plumber or auto mechanic, these are all good, well-paying jobs. They're good career paths, and I think part of this initiative is not only to get that information in front of young people and those looking to retrain, but layer on some education for parents, because what I've learned talking to Mr. Andrews and also to Mr. Holden at Georgian College is that parents are sometimes the hurdle in getting children thinking about a career in you know, what used to be called blue-collar work. But I don't know, all of you know people that are in those trades, and I can tell you that the people that I know are all doing very well financially. They've got good family lives. They're contributing to the communities, and I think they're noble careers to pursue, and there isn't enough education amongst to our young people to direct them to those paths.
If I may, Your Worship, my question was just understanding where it was going to fit in, and it felt like it wasn't in this place, it was going to be in the budget meeting. Yep. In salesman school, they actually tell you once you've sold your people to stop selling, so I don't think you need to, your diatribe was interesting to me, but it wasn't necessary, so I just want to understand the procedure of it, so thank you.
All right, trying to hammer that one home, but thank you. Okay, so maybe this is, again, a little premature, but we do have the motion on. It's been seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh to provide these funds to the Dufferin Board of Trade to get these 2 initiatives off the ground sooner than later. And that would be right in this budget now. So can we call a vote there? All in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Unfinished business. Or is there another notice of motion?
I don't have another notice of motion. I just want to make sure that I'm going to get in on the capital budget.
Okay. All right. This is like Jeopardy here, right? Okay. Mr. Taylor.
So thank you. So we're officially back in the budget now? Okay.
We're good. Did you want to talk briefly, Mr. Jones, to give us just a recap of where we're at? Can we... Sorry?
Oh, can I go back into the queue as first?
Yes.
I just want to make sure here.
I believe, and Deputy Mayor, I agree with you, maybe we could take a 5-minute break here, if that would be all right with everybody, and then we'll get back into the budget. I think we'll have Mr. Jones give a little recap of where we're at, and then Mr. Taylor. Okay, just 5 minutes. And why don't we start off with Mr. Jones giving us a recap of where we're at with our budget, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as you say, a bit of a summary where we're at this point. Thus far, Council has held 2 budget meetings, the first to consider the operating budget and the second to consider the capital budget. At the operating budget meeting last Monday, Council approved the 2019 water and wastewater operating budget, as well as the 20 to 23 water and wastewater operating budget forecast. In addition, Council approved the 20 to 23 tax dollar operating budget forecast. However, deliberations continue on the 2019 tax dollar operating budget. At the beginning of the operating budget meeting, staff indicated that the overall budget increase for the draft budget was 4.13%. Growth of 1.24% reduces the impact of the budget on the average home in Orangeville from 4.13 to 2.89%. Council passed several motions that reduced the tax increase further. Specifically, prior year surpluses were utilized to decrease the budget by $308,000, or resulting in a tax decrease of 0.88%. Additionally, the additional costs for this council chamber's renovation, which was paid for from reserves, will not be paid back to reserves, as was originally expected, thus reducing the budget by a further $137,000, or approximately 0.39%. Various other changes resulted in a 0.03% decrease as well. Significantly, the transfer to capital reserves was to increase by 1%, but will now increase by 0.5% of the tax levy, reducing the budget by $175,000. And additionally, the transfer to capital projects was also to increase by 1% in the draft budget, but will now increase by 0.5%, which also decreased the draft budget by $175,000. Moving to the draft capital budget, the budget submitted by staff anticipated that the transfer would grow by 1%, as I just noted, which would have been about $350,000 in 2019, in accordance with previous council direction. However, the council motion to increase the capital budget by 0.5% decreased the available capital dollars by $175,000, necessitating requiring council to decrease the capital budget by $175,000 to match. Last Tuesday night, during the capital budget deliberations, capital project adjustments of $215,000 were found, which surpassed the need to cut the budget by $175,000 by an additional $40,000. And I believe that that takes us now to a 0.47% tax impact on the average house in Orangeville. So as noted in the agenda, Council have identified 2 outstanding capital projects to discuss this evening. Specifically, those are the Harvey Curry Park splash pad and play structures, as well as lighting upgrades at the Alder Street Recreation Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We'll start off with Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for your update. I guess to me, we're at the end of this budget process in my mind. I don't think we're very far away from passing this. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then I'm going to make a motion. And my comments are at 0.47%. In the time I've been in Orangeville, I don't recall seeing this. I know there was some zeros ages ago, but the level of planning and thought that we've done as a group to get us to this point, I think, is incredibly impressive. Now we've just got to get over the final mark here, and I guess my concern moving forward is there is significant amounts of money that are going into the capital reserves, or capital projects, not for this year, but for the balance of this term. And I think as a council, we want to think about not just year 1, but we want to think about 2, 3, and 4 and make sure that we're doing what is responsible for the rest of the town. And my worry as I sit here today would be is we do not have all of the information that is necessary to make the decisions for those capital projects moving forward. Specifically, I think to Tony Rose. What are we going to do about that? There's $2.8 million coming up in that. I'll throw out Harvey Curry Park as being something that I do not have the due diligence in, and for me to make a snap decision on $1 million spending for Harvey Curry Park at this point, I am personally not comfortable. I would also throw the fire hall into that mix. So all of those things being said, I would ask that we all take a step back. And we've got the recreation plan that Mr. Osmond is going to run. He's going to report back to us. I think what we should do
Which we're moving into this year.
We are, yes, we're moving
the
that plan into this year. But we need that information from him and his department to be able to make these decisions about longer term capital needs and what the impact will be to the taxpayers and basically what the future of our town will be. So all that being said, I would like to make a motion. And here it is. I've written it out and I actually sent it to the clerk. I'm not sure if, is it up on the screen or how will we? No? Okay. Okay, so whereas this council will need to make many borrowing decisions over the next 4 years, especially where it pertains to Orangeville capital assets, and whereas items such as Tony Rose improvements, a new fire hall, and upgrades to Harvey Curry Park will cost the town approximately $13 million in financing, and whereas council has approved a new recreation study, which we will soon receive, and we will soon receive a new report on a new fire hall. I'd like to make a motion that borrowing $1 million for Harvey Curry Park be pushed back 1 year, which will allow this new council time to fully understand the big picture for all of our capital needs and plan with full knowledge for these events. And that, in an effort to ensure that the 2020 budget is not encumbered with a large tax increase, I move that the 1 year carrying costs, the interest and principal of the $1 million, which is $68,609, be applied against the 2019 budget. Specifically, the money should be applied against Orangeville's current outstanding debt. You know, of note, $68,609 is already included in this plan, so it's not going to, it won't increase the tax levy any further than what we've just received from Mr. Jones. And that council approved the facility lighting upgrades to Alder Arena in the sum of $100,000, which would be applied to the tax levy and represents approximately a 0.3 additional increase to the overall tax increase. So in my mind, we would be at about 0.77 under the plan I just laid out. I would also add one more point to that, and just as a friendly to Mayor Brown, I would add your motion into this and those costs for that, and we would have a three-prong motion. So that is my motion.
My motion's already been approved, so we're good, but thank you. Yeah, I won't. Okay, thank you. Shall we have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and then we'll need to have some conversation about that. But let's start with Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, through your worship, to Councillor Taylor. Again, thank you for your points. I was actually going to forward a motion, but I decided to kind of retract it because, again, after consultation I've had with Mr. Osmond, and again, I truly appreciate the input that I've had, I was looking at somewhat of a different view towards the Curry Park project, but, you know, having listened to yours, I feel that, you know, it would be, again, using a term we've used at times at this table, the prudent thing to do. You know, we're in a situation where we're wanting to ensure that we lessen the impact to the taxpayers of this community. And I think that the due diligence that we have done here certainly helps out substantially. And I don't know if, you know, delaying this particular initiative, and if I can pose the question also to Mr. Osmond, by delaying it by, you know, the period of time that Councillor Taylor has proposed, because again, we're going to be looking at this as part of the budget process later this fall in 2019. What harm would it end up imposing on that particular site? And would that, you know, kind of out of sequence pose some challenges moving forward with the budgetary commitments and other things that, again, your department has planned?
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Andrews. Well, first of all, let me say that obviously the Council could delay the project. Delaying the project would be a matter of reviewing it as per Councillor Taylor's motion. The only concern I have is it's a little bit of a risk, given that it's 19, 20 years old, this particular park. It's in our plan process because of the timeframes that we're putting in place because of the parks master plan was done back in 2015. The only concern I have is the splash pad itself right now is experiencing problems, and we have issues under the surface with 2 features of that particular unit that don't work. One is electrical and one is a bit of a plumbing issue. We can run it that way to get into another year. If something breaks any further, we would have to cut it, and I wouldn't recommend doing that because once you do that, you really change the integrity of that particular splash pad. So you really, my other comment to Councillor Andrews earlier was I would prefer and recommend that you not take on a split project, i.e. play structure 1 and then a splash pad, because of the inclusion piece of the unit, and how the unit is created accessible, is far more preferred that we do the whole thing at one time. So it is $1 million project that way. So if it's a 1-year delay, it's a 1-year delay, and we would take our particular chances with the unit and try to keep it moving for another year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for putting together a well-thought-out motion. I will tend to disagree in principle with respect to the work at Harvey Curry. I'm not sure we'll have better information by the time the budget comes in October, even with an accelerated recreation master plan. I do also agree, though, that we need to be looking at the longer-term financing, and to go very aggressively in year 1 with a number of expenditures coming down the line, I think would be irresponsible. So I won't support it as is. If it happens to fall, I'd like to open the discussion toward, and the reason sort of I raised this the first time last week was to look at the financing angle, and if there's room now to invest more in a particular project, in this case the Harvey Curry renovations, I think now would be the time to do so, to save on some of those interest payments and long-term debt, especially given the number of other financing projects that will be coming our way.
Councillor Post.
I have a couple of questions as well. Thank you to my fellow councillors for those comments. I tend to think that Harvey Curry Park is one that's extremely important and one that is of the utmost priority. It's probably our most well-used park in Orangeville. And there have been significant comments throughout the last couple of years about the safety of the splash pad, specifically throughout social media. I do think it's important that we go ahead with that project as it is in the budget for right now. So as it is right now, with all due respect, Councillor Taylor, I would not support your current motion. And I do have the question as well for Mr. Osmond. Perhaps you can help us out with this. And the current state that the park is in, I know that there's notes about it being compliant with CSA standards. Where are we at with that right now? I see that it's been pushed through for this year for that specific reason. And can you just make comments on the safety of the park right now for our residents?
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Post. The play structure itself, it's safe, but it's 19 years old, and there's parts of the there's features on that particular playground that have been taken off and repaired, and we continue to repair. We will maintain it in a safe condition. Otherwise, we will shut down components of that particular play structure, and that would be something we'd have to do. Some of the problems staff are having with that particular unit, we get a lot of rust build up on the unit now. There's features that we're continually repairing. We're having trouble now getting the parts because these old units are no longer in that catalog, and we got to find parts or shut down pieces. Likewise with the splash pad is probably one of the original splash pads in the province. It is old. Orangeville has been quite fortunate to have it for 20 years, and it's time that it be repaired, and not repaired, replaced within our time frame. As I said earlier, you could buy time, like everything, and we can push it a little bit further. The reason why, again, it's in the 2019 budget is because it comes up on our asset management piece financially, and we don't push it into the heavier years in terms of financing going forward, as you see in your 5-year window. So we brought it in 2019 to get it up and running. The issue with delaying it is that when we delay this project in 2019, we take it into 2020, we could be pushing it in 2021 because of the way we do it. The intention here is to shut this thing down try to get through the summer, because shutting down a splash pad, one of only two, and you're actually correct, it is the ISU's particular unit we have. It's a large park, and if you shut it down, then we would create other problems. So we're going to push this to September and do the actual, have all the tenders done and ready to roll for September. If a unit goes down in the meantime, we would actually have a clause in that we can pull the thing back and start earlier. That was our intention. If we may have a problem if we go in September and end up in October, is we won't be able to put down the rubber pad because it has to be done in 23 degree temperatures for optimal performance, and that means we would have to go in next spring. So we still could be a year getting it done in terms of the lag time if we have problems with the rubber surface. That's an overview of the particular. Staff have done the CSA standard. The CSA standard is something that we apply. We continue to do it. If we can't maintain a CSA standard, we pull parts of the unit.
So just quickly before I go to Councillor Sherwood, Mr. Osmond, so you would start the construction in September and it would be ready for spring of 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, or Sherwood, I should say.
Oh, yeah. Through you, Mayor Brown, to Mr. Osmond. I happen to live in that neighborhood, and I hear all the sounds of the children enjoying that. But I can tell you, spending a lot of time there myself with my grandchildren, this splash pad is in dire needs of being replaced. And I mean, it's very sad to see 20 kids all go under one little trinkle that's coming through. And I know I've been slightly very disappointed in that. So unfortunately, I won't support Councillor Taylor's motion to defer it, only because I really think this is something we need to do. That park brings people not just from Orangeville, but outside of our community as well. And it's a well-known place for our children with needs. Having said this, and I still have a hard time with the financing of the $1 million. And I know that, Mr. Osmond, you just kind of were deterring us from doing it in a two-stage part. But is there any way that we could consider just doing the splash pad and what that cost would be if we decided to go with the splash pad now and then do the other at another time, possibly 2020?
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Sherwood. You could do it. It creates complications for us because, first of all, the entire park will be wheelchair accessible for all mobility, so that it'll be a particular surface through the entire park, rubberized surface, not just on the splash pad itself. It'd be mostly concrete, but when we do it, when we roll out rubberized surface, we don't want heavy equipment moving around and touching it. So we're in a small space. So the intent was to do it all one time, so everything gets shut down, replaced all at one time. If we have heavy equipment into that particular park, we'll still do the shutdown, I guess, in the long view. But our intention is to do one follow swoop, bring in the contractors, do the whole park, and be finished with it. If you do both, you could do both. We would have to stage it in such a way that we would protect the one or the other, depending how you do it. Splash pad would have to go first because it's in the worst shape. We would have to protect the splash pad while we're doing the play structure in the future year. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to do that when you're working around play structures and splash pads.
So I guess I'll be putting a further motion in if Councillor Taylor's motion fails.
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, even though I seconded the motion, I don't really support delaying it for a year, but I also support borrowing the money. Again, we're well within our limits as we were advised as far as borrowing, so I don't know why we wouldn't go for it instead of raising the tax. Again, by borrowing the money, future generations that are going to use the splash pad are going to be paying for it. I think it makes perfect sense to borrow the money, and I just think we should do it and get it fixed now. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. To me, I agree. I'm the one who said initially that the debt that we have is low. Interest rates are low, and we should not be concerned with borrowing a portion of money. And so we're in good shape in a financial system. I really want to make sure we're all going to take a wide view of what these capital projects are. I've pulled up what those debt payments would be over the next 4 years. This year, if we approve everything that we have in it, our total debt service charges will be $118,609. In 2020, team, we moved to $619,000. Okay? So this is why this is important. We moved from 118 to 619. 2021, we moved to 916. 2022, we stay at 916. 2023, we stay at 916. It's going to hurt us as we go forward, and these will limit our decisions as a group. And that my only comment is, hey, can we just take a breath? And I'm not against spending the money on the park. I'd just like to hear what the whole package is, and then we can go out and make our movements. It will be a big play for us next year as we go through this budget process.
Okay, so if there isn't any further comment, I think we need to call a vote here, which was, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Brown, I just wonder if council would like to split this motion, since there is the part in there about the lighting at Alder too. Did you want separate votes on those items?
Yes. Okay, so let's vote on the first item, which was to defer the spending of $1 million through borrowing to repair Harvey Curry Park. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry. And the other portion of that, Mayor Brown, was to take the $68,000 that we would have spent on the principal and interest and apply that to the debt.
Right.
Which would leave our charges for this year, our tax increase, whole.
Right. Okay, so that being said, all those in favor? All those opposed? That motion fails. So let's go on to Councillor Taylor's second motion, which was to agree to spend $100,000 out of tax levy for upgrading lighting at the Alder Street Rec Complex. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Peters. Any further comment on that particular motion? All those in favor? That passes unanimously. So we need to circle back to Harvey Curry Park. Does anybody want to make a motion or further comment? Councillor Post.
I would like to make a motion that we go ahead with Harvey Curry Park as planned in the original capital budget, financing at $1 million and doing the entire project at once, not separating it, to ensure that the children and the families that are using the park are not going to be interrupted in that on two separate occasions, one for the splash pad and one for the play structure. So I think it's important we do it all, so just move forward with it as written.
Okay, we have Deputy Mayor McIntosh seconding that motion. I'll have some comment now. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to sort of stick to my guns here and sort of counter the Deputy Mayor's comment. Again, not to make a huge deal of this, but we have very significant investments coming up. I think this is the opportunity to get out ahead of it for $1 million rather than the fire hall for 8 or 20 rows for whatever that happens to be. So I wouldn't be supporting this. Again, I'd like to accelerate it, avoid some of that debt when we can. The increase that's proposed currently could allow for some additional investment in such an important facility. I agree it has to be done this year, so those are my comments.
Wondering if staff, maybe Acting Treasurer West, if you could update us, if this was $1 million, you're asking to go at a tax levy?
Not entirely.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, Councillor Peters.
I guess I would ask the Acting Treasurer or Acting CAO in this case for a discussion regarding partial investment, I suppose, instead of taking the $1 million up front, if we can invest in a portion of that to reduce the debt. I'm not saying the entire $1 million should be absorbed in 1 year by the tax levy, perhaps a portion with levy, a portion with reserves, whatever that sort of works out to. I haven't, run the numbers per se, but I think that should be investigated, and I don't think it has been so far.
Councillor Taylor.
So the math, with all due respect to everybody, is quite easy. I mean, $350,000 is a percent. So if we funded the million, you're going to add 3%. So we'll be sitting at around 3.5%. I'm sure the deputy treasurer will have a slightly different amount than that, but that's what it would do to us. So we'd go from a 0.5 to a 3.5% increase. There could be variances of that if we funded half and whatnot, but that's the math.
Right. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to fund the $1 million refurbishment of Harvey Curry Park with borrowed money, which has been seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. I think we'll call a vote on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Taylor and Councillor Peters are opposed. That motion passes. Okay, so let's see, what else have we got here? Councillor Peters, go right ahead.
Thank you. I had I guess a couple questions or comments on sort of the longer term budget. I know we're only approving those in principle. I don't know if those comments should be fielded now or by whom, but I could start with an example if you like.
I'd be happy to hear that.
Certainly.
Go right ahead, sir.
So again, not to lock us into certain costs, but having worked in the development and construction field now, working currently on a number of fire halls, I believe the $8 million estimate is likely low. I don't know if changing that number during this process is the right time or if more work needs to be done. I'd like to offer that sort of opinion at this point, and perhaps I could ask the acting treasurer or Mr. Osmond to comment on how that number may be influenced as we look ahead at future years.
If I'm not mistaken, we have a consultant's report coming. Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Peters. Yes, there's an actual report coming, and you're correct. We did have a $8 million budgeted amount at the earlier stage a year ago, and now we're back doing the planning for that. There's still some questions that are not answered in terms of land and so on and so forth. And we may have to come back and revisit that $8 million number. And I have done some review as well after some discussion on firewalls, and it depends on what our final needs are. That's something we're also looking at with the consultants, and we will have to come back with probably a new budget. Hopefully it stays around $8 billion. Right now we have to wait for that full report and revisit that at that time. So that report will come in the next few months this year and be on the table way before we start discussing budget for 2020.
Thank you. Did you have further comment? Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to make sure I understand, are we on 16.2 or are we speaking to 16.3? Because
we haven't gone through 16.2 yet. We're just kind of getting there. Councillor Peters wanted to have further comment.
Because they're different, right? Because now I think we're ready to approve the capital budget for 2019, but I'd like to speak to the rest of the plan on 16.3.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the capital budget
okay,
as described.
Yeah. Okay. I want to address council for a moment here. This morning I entertained members of the Legion regarding the monument request that they had for Greenwood Cemetery. The amount was $30,000. So I think a number of us here were concerned about another amount of money being spent to honor our war dead, because we've got a number of war memorials here in town, including a cairn at the Forest Lawn Cemetery. We have a war memorial at the Legion. the Legion's getting tax abatement. We have the Bravery Park project that we're participating in as a town. And of course, we have our beautiful cenotaph in Alexander Park. But they did give an impassioned pitch this morning. And what we asked the Legion is there a way that they can do some fundraising to kind of help us get over this, this significant expense? And so some of the things that happened this morning, they produced the quotation for this monument, which turned out to be $26,000 plus HST. And as some council members and some members of the public may know, if things are purchased through the town rather than a third party, there is some HST relief. And we did learn from Treasurer this morning that almost all of the HST could be removed from that ask amount of $3,000. So that was a good thing that happened this morning. We also learned that the Legion can submit a request to their Poppy Fund and also to their Ladies Auxiliary. And Chris, the former president of the Legion, who was there this morning, suggested it. He thought it was very possible for him to get an additional $5,000 of funding. So we start working this $26,000 backwards, taking off $5,000 from the Legion. They're down to $21,000. What Councillor Sherwood, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and I kicked around after they left was perhaps we could find $5,000 this year in our budget to put towards that monument, and that we would collectively help the Legion to search out additional funds through service clubs and other ways to make up the additional $16,000 that they need to create this, which would be a beautiful monument in the Greenwood Cemetery. So what the question to council here is although the ask was for $30,000 originally, we've been able to back that down to 26. I believe we and Deputy Mayor McIntosh and Councillor Sherwood have both agreed that we'll try and help with some reach out to service clubs and such. But to start the ball rolling for these people, knowing that they'll be able to come up with $5,000 immediately, that we would match them to the tune of $5,000 and give them a promise that we'll help reach out and help them raise the additional funds to make this monument happen. So basically, it's a $5,000 ask from Town Council to go towards the Legion Monument at Greenwood Cemetery. Is that true? So that's a motion. Deputy Mayor McIntosh will second it. I'd like to have some comment from our councillors. Councillor Post.
Just a quick question for you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate all your comments. Is that $5,000 dependent on or conditional on them completing the additional fundraising?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. That would be the motion. That's correct. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly sensitive to the cause, and I appreciate the research that's been done and the outreach potentially to other community groups. I would feel a little more satisfied if they went through the community grant program the way that numerous other community groups and memberships have done, only to keep sort of that thing, that responsibility and that engagement consistent. We will field a lot of requests over the 4 years. I would prefer that they all stick to a specific process, especially now that we're going to revisit what that grant amount is and how it's awarded. So this is going to seem really petty over a very small amount, but I would prefer to stick to the process. I don't believe there's an immediate urgency for it, so those are just my thoughts.
Right. Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to echo Councillor Peters' thoughts. I'm not an emotional guy. I got very emotional when we went through this because there was causes that I wanted to put through. It feels odd that there would be a meeting this morning, and you know, I'd almost prefer that they would come here. I trust you implicitly, Mr. Mayor, but you know, the rest of us didn't get to see that presentation. And in the background here, I have emailed Bravery Park and been asking them for what their information was. I'm wondering, Mr. Jones or Mr. Osmond, I hate to put you on the spot. I'm just curious, do you have any background on what Bravery Park would have been given by Town Council in the past? In my mind, it was 0, but I could be proven incorrect.
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Taylor, the fund that gets accessed for these kinds of projects is under the matching fund, which traditionally, well, not traditionally, but has fallen under parks. And in the case of Bravery Park, we would have matched over the time since it started, I think 2014 or what the case would be. In actual fact, it took a couple of years for us to catch up with that because the monument itself didn't get delivered until late. So we have provided a $5,000 cash matching fund to the Bravery Park project in the past 2 or 3 years. So that was covered off that way.
One other issue I wanted to make council aware of, which we saw this morning, is it's unfortunate, but there was some dialogue between the previous mayor and the Legion. In fact, an email or a text to them saying after the September 10th, 2018 council meeting on September 11th, the former mayor texted Chris of the Legion saying, "You've been approved, $30,000 has been approved." Now, we pulled the minutes this morning, and in fact it said that the money was being pushed into 2019's budget discussion, and that in fact there was no approval of this. So they felt that it had been approved, they got this notification, and unfortunately that's not the case. So that was explained to us this morning. So I agree with what Councillor P is saying, that we've been a little lax on this criteria for community grants. So and also we're going to be revisiting all this in 6 months from now as well. So I certainly understand that. However, let's go through the motion because we did have a motion, I think, on the floor for $5,000 to be put into the tax levy, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Do you have further comments?
Through your worship, to Councillor Peters, the reason they didn't go through the process as they should have is they were under the impression that it had been passed and it was being budgeted for. That's why they didn't. They didn't try to go around, circumvent the whole system. They actually believed that it was approved. So that, just for explanation, that's why they weren't trying to go around it.
Okay, so I think on the $5,000 ask, with the codicil that this won't be going forward unless the further funding can be found. I'd like to call a vote on that, unless there's further commentary. Oh, a tally? Okay. Well, yeah. So, are we still at 0.47 here, or we've added 100,000? Is that right?
Through you, Your Worship, we have added a number of items this evening. We added the $15,000 for the Board of Trade Initiatives.
Yes.
We added the $100,000 for the Alder Street Recreation Center lighting upgrades. If we include the $5,000 for the Legion Monument, that would put us at a budget increase of 0.82%.
So we're at 0.080 before the 5,000, or after?
No, before the 5,000, we're at 0.80, which I believe is what's on the screen.
Yeah.
And if we add in the 5,000 to that, we would be at 0.82.
0.82. Right. Right. Okay. So, sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thank you for the background. There's a bunch of things in politics that bothers me, and integrity is certainly one of them. And I really feel bad for the Legion and what has happened. I also feel bad for us because we're outside of a process. Like Councillor Peters, I'm very process-driven. So this doesn't feel good to me that we would do it. It's only $5,000. I appreciate the work that yourself and the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Sherwood have done this morning. So I will vote in favor of it, but I want the Legion to know I don't like the way this has gone in terms of the process. I like their organization, I like their event, but I don't like the way the process has gone. And in the future, I think once we get these actions set up by staff in terms of what this approval rate will be, in the future, you know, I'd like to be more diligent about the whole system. And again, it's only $5,000, and in the spirit of getting along with the rest of council, I'll approve it, but it doesn't feel great to me.
Okay. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, through your worship, to Councillor Taylor. Again, I echo exactly what you've just stated. And again, you know, sometimes what happens for those of you that may be watching online or those of you in the gallery, you know, we seem to be on many of the same pages here. And I think that, you know, optically, it's one of those situations where I do feel bad that, you know, this unfortunately happened. But at the same time, I think that the resolution that you have come up with seems to be fair. And I will, too, also support the motion.
Well, I hope with the Legions already their commitment of $5,000, our commitment of $5,000 is a long way to getting this monument completed. And I've already talked to some Lions Club members, and I think come budget time in September, we'll be able to get some money from some of the service clubs as well. Councillor Taylor.
My last ask, Your Worship, is could we have the Legion come back in and do a presentation once they have the monument pictures and set up, and not because we'll be doing an approval, but just to be a presentation to council. But I think the citizens of Orangeville and myself and the rest of council would be very interested to see what they've done, and it'd be nice to share our support for them at that time.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so we now have a motion to spend an additional $5,000, a contribution towards the Royal Canadian Legion Monument for Greenwood Cemetery. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Peters is opposed. That motion is passed. Okay, so I guess we'll get back to where we were, which was 16.2. Are we ready now to pass a capital budget? Councillor Taylor.
Excuse me? I'd like to make the motion that we pass the 2019 capital budget.
Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? That passed unanimously. 16.3. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry to monopolize things here, but so 16.3, which speaks to the 2020 to 2023 capital budget adoption in principle. I do not feel good about adopting it in principle. I'm not satisfied with what I see moving forward. I do not have the information that is required. The amount of money, again, is $13 million that we would have to look after as a council, and I think it's irresponsible of us to spend that type of money up front. And again, so the people at home who are watching understand, we're not actually saying we're going to do these things, but we are adopting in principle. So I'd like to make a motion regarding 16.3 in the 2020 to 2023 capital budget. I recommend that the projects currently being held in the 5-year plan be held pending the outcome of the 2020 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. This includes, actually I had Harvey Curry, this includes the Fire Hall, Library, and Tony Rose. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to sort of continue the conversation I started with the fire hall. Whether or not that number changes, you know, within this draft of approval for the next few years or not, I think it is wise to forecast that, and the sooner we get that number, the better. I'd be willing to put $1 down that it will be more than $8 million, but we can wait and see. Again, looking at capital items, there's another item on sort of my mind that hasn't come up as part of this process. Again, whether or not it gets written into this budget in principle, or we work with staff over the coming months to sort it out. But you know, the Mill Creek rehabilitation was started. The section that was done very well. But there's more to do. Partly that's going to be funded by the town, CVC, other interested parties. Again, I don't know what that number is, so maybe it's not to be included, but while we're talking about that long-term budget, I just wanted to table that and say this is an item I don't think has been captured that I think is important to be included.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on this, I guess. Councillor Taylor's motion. Do you have that captured, Madam Clerk? Okay. Can you? Councillor Taylor.
Okay, so for 16.3, 2020 to 2023 capital budget, I recommend that the projects currently being held in the 5-year plan be held pending the outcome of the 2020 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. This includes the Fire Hall, Library, and Tony Rose. And just one other comment, if I may. I did speak with Mr. Osmond about this today and asked for advice in terms of how we could push this forward, and this is what we aligned to push. Okay, so.
All right. Let's have one more comment from Councillor Peters before
Thank you,
we
Mr.
vote on
Mayor. Yeah, maybe I could just get some clarity. I mean, these are items that will have to hit our budget process at some point. So is this a disagreement in principle with the projects, or how is this to be taken by the public in terms of where that money will fall eventually?
Councillor Taylor.
I'll offer mine, then if I could, I'll ask if it would be okay if Mr. Osmond spoke to it as well. But basically what I'm saying is I do not approve these projects until I have more information. So I will not approve the plan until I have further understanding of the rest of these projects. It does not mean that these projects won't go through. It just means that until we have that recreation plan in hand from Mr. Osmond, we do not have the information that's necessary to make these decisions. So what we're essentially saying is that I won't pass the, I guess it's a 4-year plan now, but I'm not saying I won't do the projects. I'm not giving them carte blanche to go ahead with these plans or the 5-year plan until we have the information required. And perhaps Mr. Osmond can be more eloquent than I can.
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Taylor and Council, first of all, the approval of the capital budget in principle just covers the next 4 years in principle, and there's a lot of budget items in that 4 years that will probably come back to be readdressed in different ways and from time to time. The ones that are of particular interest right now, because of some issues that's going on, the reason why we want to, or Councillor Taylor is suggesting we hold on those that are being looked at in the master plan, it will give us the direction we will need, give council the direction we need to make a very clear decision on where you need to go based on that plan on your table. And that plan will be completed it will be in 2020. So it'll address the Tony Rose in particular. The issue that's come up now with the fire hall, likewise, if the fire hall is a concern and you think is going to be a concern, there's no reason why you can't pass the budget in principle, but with a hold on 2 or 3 of those items that you're pending the outcome of a report or whatever the case would be. And that can have a sort of a caveat to the motion. That way we will continue on with the approval of the budget in principle.
If I could just get a clarification, did you say that the recreational master plan wouldn't be completed until 2020?
That's correct, Your Worship. The plan will start in 2019, and we expect to be finished by the spring of 2020.
Okay, so our next budget session won't have that information, which is unfortunate. Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Perhaps this is a friendly amendment, but given that, and Mr. Osmond can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the library or fire hall would fall under the Parks and Rec master plan. So perhaps the motion is just for further reports and investigation rather than hinging each of those items to a specific document that may not be entirely relevant to the project, if you know what I mean.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, I would be open to that. The other piece of this is all of us need to be really careful about what we're doing with the fire hall. With all due respect to my friends in the fire department, I've taken a tour of that building. It is an abomination. It needs to be done. I just want to have the information at my hands and have my due diligence. So to our fire friends, I'm not saying we're not going to do this. It's just, it is a big commitment, and it's one that could define this council in a lot of ways. So I want to make sure that I understand that. I have not spoken to our Chief Librarian, Darla Fraser, regarding the elevator and some front area things that she wants done as well. So I guess I'm just saying I don't feel comfortable approving these items in principle without having that level of understanding. So if council would pass it based on the rec report, that's fine with me, but I still think we have these other things that we need to talk about too.
Okay, so I think we need a seconder on the friendly amendment. Do we have a seconder on the friendly amendment? Sorry. Councillor Peters.
Sorry, just to clarify that, all I meant is that it seemed that the motion was tying each of the projects to the Parks and Rec Master Plan, when in fact that document would only advise on certain of those projects. So the blanket statement would be, yes, to hold them, but pending the appropriate reports and investigation, one of which would be the Parks and Rec Master Plan.
Okay, we have a seconder for the friendly amendment, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, so can we vote on that first? Madam Clerk.
Sorry. If it's a friendly amendment, we can just vote on it all at once.
On all at once. Very good. Okay. All in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're at 16.4, 2019 operating budget adoption. Recommendation that the 2019 operating budget be approved in principle, subject to approval of the final budget calculation by council on February the 11th, 2019. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are many items, obviously, as we went through the operating budget that we are in favor of. I think in general is a very solid budget. One thing I didn't agree with at the outset, and that may prevent me from voting in favor in this case, again, was the cut to the reserves. Again, looking at the number of debt projects we're taking on, given where we are at the current increase, I'm not sure this is the year to do that. Again, I'm trying to accelerate the investment in some of these important features and reducing the debt on the town in the long term. And I think, you know, depending on what the motion goes, I would motion to bring back the 0.5% reduction on the capital budget item to satisfy, again, some of that long-term planning from a financial perspective.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Peters, I appreciate where you're coming from as a saver and a non-debt lover. I certainly, I'm aligned to your thinking. I'd be the different side of the coin, though. If something like that was to come through and we were to increase the tax levy, I wouldn't be in favor of actually putting it in reserves. And perhaps I would ask finance for their opinion as well, but I would rather see us put it on the debt. And why I would put it on the debt versus the reserves is we actually get the added benefit of less interest. So, you know, 100,000 is actually, you know, 103.5. Terrible math on my part, but you know, you would be further ahead doing that. It's a philosophical discussion that, you know, I'll lose or I'll win. It doesn't matter, but that's my thinking, is I'd put it on the debt.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 2019 operating budget as it is.
I'll second that. Any further comments before we vote? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Peters is opposed. 16.5, capital budget information. The following items be received. This is a recommendation that the following items be received as information. The capital budget, 5-year capital budget summary by department, capital items to consider, capital project submissions, and then reserves, the summary and detail, and under debt, the summary. We have a motion to receive those items. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Okay, we passed 16.5. Going on to new business. It looks like the only new business we have, Madam Clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, is the appointment of alternates for members of County Council. There has been correspondence back and forth. Both Councillor Taylor and Councillor Sherwood have put their hats in the ring here for one of these positions. Are there any other councillors that would like to, let me talk to Councillor Andrews.
I would like to endorse Councillor Sherwood's appointment.
Okay. All right. Can we, and for the position of alternate for Mayor Brown or Deputy Mayor McIntosh?
That is dependent on herself. I was actually thinking of Deputy Mayor McIntosh myself.
Okay. So may I have a seconder for that? Councillor Taylor. So this is to appoint Councillor Sherwood as the alternate for, to replace Deputy Mayor McIntosh in the event he cannot attend County Council. All in favor? Opposed? That has been passed unanimously. We need another motion for the alternate to replace Mayor Brown.
I will also endorse Councillor Taylor's appointment as your alternate at County Council.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, are you wish to accept that? Councillor Taylor.
I'm very excited, Your Worship. Can I wear the chain of office?
No. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Peters. All in favor? Okay, we have Councillor Taylor appointed as the alternate for Mayor Brown to attend meetings of County Council and standing committees of which Mayor Brown is a member in his absence. Okay, on to 18. This is the bylaws, confirming bylaws. May we have a motion to, Madam Clerk, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to draw council's attention. It's a little bit more than the confirming bylaws. It's also the debenture bylaw for $18 million. For the water pollution control plant.
Okay, let me read this one. Recommendation that the bylaws listed below be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, numbered sequentially, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign them accordingly. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation of the town of Orangeville at its budget meeting held on January 22nd, 2019. B, a bylaw to authorize the borrowing upon serial debentures in the principal amount of $18,183,581 towards the cost of the water pollution control plant expansion. And C, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation of the town of Orange at its regular council meeting held on January 28th, 2019. May you have a motion? Oh, let's have a comment from Councillor Andrews.
Actually, I was holding it off. I was just trying to stay in the queue.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
All right. You're making the motion for this? Councillor Sherwood is making a motion. We need a seconder for that. Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Okay, that's passed unanimously. I believe there's no other business. Madam Clerk.
Well,
One more item. Could we have a motion from council to cancel the budget meetings of January 29th, February 12th, and March 4th, please?
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh is making that, and Councillor Andrews is seconding that. All in favor? Okay. So thank you to those in the gallery still here. Thank you to town staff for helping us complete this budget process, and thank you to council as well. I think it was a good.
So
yes, we need a motion to adjourn.
May I just, before we adjourn, I understand that this might be out of sequence, but I figured I might be able to squeeze it under new business. But I just wanted to take the time to congratulate the Orangeville Public Library for an incredibly successful Family Literacy Day that was held on Saturday. It was just a phenomenal event to see the number of children, families that were in the Orangeville Public Library Saturday to learn about literacy. And again, myself being an educator, I think it's imperative that we as a community embrace this opportunity. And again, kudos to your staff. Mr. Osmond, they did a phenomenal job.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you.